All right, current prophetic events number 10. We have completed our section on Israel, and we're going to do what we just did with Israel. With Israel, we started from the very basic, elementary, and then we worked our way up. And for some, that basic elementary stuff was review. For some, that was brand new material. And I'm sure as we get into Revelation 13, we're going to follow that same pattern. We're going to start with the very basic stuff and then work our way into a little bit more difficult things to understand and to grasp. And we're going to follow that same pattern, I'm sure, and that some people this is going to be review, and for some this is going to be brand new material as we work on Revelation chapter 13. So since half of you already turned in there, we can turn there. First, we're going to talk about our current news issue, or something that's in the news, to connect why we're studying this, because that's, of course, what this whole series is about, current prophetic events. So this section I'm going to detail with you, or read to you, is from Keep the Faith Ministries. It's a Seventh-day Adventist website. It also helps keep you current with news and things. They send out several emails pretty much every day. And so it was just letting us know about something going on in Germany. It says, Christmas Eve fell on Sunday this year. That is one of Germany's traditional shopping days, but it also clashed with the German Constitution's provision that recognizes Sunday as a day of rest. So just like most every state in the United States, but of course here we don't necessarily enforce them, or we enforce them in different ways, there are blue laws in Germany. Blue laws being that Sunday is supposed to be treated differently commercially. Businesses either should be shut down or certain things shouldn't be sold. Have you ever experienced the blue law in any state as you've traveled or lived? Washington State? Okay. Nevada. Oh, Nevada's got some? Can't buy a car on Sunday. I didn't know that. Yeah, when we lived in Arizona, we did our shopping in Gallup, New Mexico. And of course, we were never looking for alcohol, but big signs in Walmart, no alcohol sales on Sundays. Some states are no alcohol sales in the morning because they don't want you going to church drunk. So that after church, they'll sell alcohol. So we see it in America in different ways. But in Germany, there are very strict blue laws pretty much across the board in Germany that stores have to be closed. Now, we're going to notice as I keep reading this, though the laws state that this isn't religious-based, this is family-based. People should be home, they should be resting, etc. We're going to notice that this has a great deal actually to do with religion, even though, again, they deny that. Hi, Ann, come on in. So it continues, bakeries and kiosks and shops in train stations have long enjoyed an exception to this law, and there are also special cases made for a limited number of shopping Sundays linked to events. For example, in Berlin, the state has allowed for 8 Sunday shopping days in 2017 in connection with Jazz Fest, big jazz festival, or a Sunday celebration of Reunification Day. So there are strict blue laws across the board. Places should be closed on Sundays. People should be home. It's about families and it's about rest. But they make provisions for certain businesses, bakeries, kiosks, and train station shops. Now, don't those people still have families? Yeah. Don't they still have needs of rest? Yeah. Jazz Fest, Reunification Day, and don't people have to work on these days and don't get to celebrate with their families? Yeah. Now, Reunification Day, I would assume, is just like our July 4th, just like our 4th of July, right? It's a big day for us, it's barbecues and fireworks and family time. So why make these adjustments for these days if it's about rest and family? Okay, it's not really about those things, even though we're told it is. But in 2017, when some shops announced they might be open on Christmas Eve, tradition clashed with commercialism. So it's when Christmas Eve fell on Sunday, and Christmas Eve is kind of like our Black Friday, from what I'm reading, where it's a huge shopping day and everyone's out there shopping, and all of a sudden it falls on a Sunday, and all these stores are closed. what do we do? It says a Munich alliance made up of churches and unions gained 62,000 signatures for a petition that was called Sundays Must Remain Free. The Church Union Alliance sent the petition to German department stores, Giants Karstadt and Galeria Kaufhof, as a Christmas present to the retailers that called for ending the Sunday rest law this past spring. In the end, the department stores will be closed on December 24th. All right, so when all these big stores wanted to keep their doors open on this Sunday, who stepped in? Churches and unions, right? The churches and the unions worked together to get it. And in the end, they got what they wanted. It says the department stores were closed on December 24th, right? So, did they make this decision based on rest or family? If it was based on rest or family, they would have stayed closed on Christmas Eve, right? They made this based on, they would have, but they based this on what the churches wanted, right? Okay, various news polls that found that most Germans do not support Christmas Eve as a shopping day. A survey conducted this past November by Polling Research Institute found that 87% of Germans believe shops should be closed on Christmas Eve. So all these businesses wanted them open. They weren't basing that on rest or family. They're basing that on money, right, income. But when the churches pressured them, then they wanted to close. 87% of Germans, according to these surveys, 87% want them closed on Sundays. Yeah, go ahead.
Is this the first? It just seems odd. I mean, Sunday's been Christmas Eve many times.
I'm sure, yeah.
Does it indicate whether or not this is just the first time this came up, or did something change?
Yeah, it doesn't, but in looking at it, yeah, so they haven't had these arguments in the past. The last time would have been several years ago. But yeah, so we see a reemergence of this idea. In fact, the European Union itself is pushing for Sunday laws. And I don't have that research in front of me, but I was looking at it earlier. You can definitely see it online. It's very clear. The whole European Union are pushing for Sunday laws, these blue laws, where people have to close their shops. So yeah, it's not necessarily a new item, but it's a reemergence of popular human support for these stores to be closed. It says, retailers, like everyone else, want to prepare for Christmas and celebrate with their families. If Christmas Eve is a Sunday this year, the idea of using the Sunday opening hours that day is incredibly cynical. And that was a quote from one of the trade unions. So he says, and this is the last paragraph I'll read, notice that opposition to Sunday shopping involves the churches and unions. Germany's constitution already has Sunday blue laws in force, as to several other European nations. So the laws are already there. The constitution already says it. But people were going to break it, and it wasn't like cops were coming in, right? No one was enforcing the Constitution. When the Constitution was being broken, it was the churches and unions who stepped up to the plate. Yeah.
You know what else is interesting? It just made more people not honor the Sabbath.
Yeah.
You know, because they had to do it the day before, which was Sabbath.
Right. Yeah, good point. If they were going to be closed on the 24th, that means everyone had to do their shopping on the 23rd. Yeah, which would have been Sabbath hours. You're right. Yeah, and that's at the very core of this issue, right? This whole issue that we're going to continue to develop as we covered Revelation 13 for a few weeks is that this is all prophetic relevance because we know where the world is headed, to this universal Sunday law that's going to be coming. And yeah, because if Sunday is closed, then you've got to do it on Sabbath, right? And it makes me wonder, and we'll get there, I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but it makes me wonder about, America's pastime, which is sports, and more specifically, Sunday is a holy day in the football world, right? It's the NFL day, right? And the NFL is so on the outs with the government and with Trump and his policies and with the churches and all. A lot of people boycotting the NFL because of the Black Lives Matters movement and because of the police protests and things with the kneeling. It's so on the outside with it, they're going to have to try to work their way back with the public and with the government at some point. And I've been wondering if this is just preemptive to, okay, we'll move it and we'll start having football games on Saturday. But anyway, that's just a wild theory right now. on my part. So again, this isn't about law, because the law already says it. This isn't about families and rest, even though the union says this is about families and rest, right? It's not really about that, because the law, they would have just said, the law says it. But rather they united with churches to push the Christian world into pushing behind this, right? Okay, so this isn't about giving your employees a rest or helping them prepare for Christmas. It's really, and it's not without precedence either. They've made exceptions because of other days, but Christmas isn't just a regular day in modern Christianity. It's not just like Jazz Fest or Reunification Day. It's a religious service, right? It's a religious holiday for many, not for all, but for many, it's a religious day. And so it was like religion on top of religion, Christmas on top of Sunday. That's a really special day for a lot, and it was trampling on religious principles. Okay, that's what it was really all about. So we have all that we have left. If it's not all about all those other things, all we have left is the pressure of the majority of the people in town or in those areas. The people, the church union alliances, were pushing for that petition. Okay, so what is to you? What is a government? Something we can all do without. But okay, let's go through that for a bit. Something we can all do without. There's definitely moments I feel like that, right? Maybe this time of year when we're doing our taxes, right? But if we don't have government, then what else do we not have? We don't have order. We don't have laws, right? And so government and law is synonymous. They're the same thing. What is anarchy? It's against not just government, but it's against law, right? And because there's no law, anarchy is really a fight against law. And if there is no law, then there is no government, right? So who's in charge during an anarchy?
Oh, probably a group of people who don't know what they're doing.
Well, then what's the difference with a democracy?
Right now.
Yeah, so no one, I would be in charge of an anarchy. You would be in charge of an anarchy. Everyone would have their own authority over their own lives in an anarchy, right? Because we all create our own laws and morals. Okay? So government and law goes hand in hand. They're synonymous. You can't have a government without law. And when you have law, you have government, right? Doesn't God have a government? God is what? He's a king. Isn't that a government? Mm-hmm. It's more of a theocracy than a monarchy, right? A theocracy is God is in charge, not a king, a man, but God, the king, is in charge. It's a theocracy. So God's government is in charge. And does God have a law? Yeah. Absolutely, right? The Ark of the Covenant, and awful artist, of course. You've come to know that. But here's the Ark of the Covenant. In the middle's the mercy seat, and that represents the throne of God, right? And there's items inside the box, of course. There's the manna, and there's the Aaron's rod. But what's directly in the middle underneath the mercy seat? Yep, the 10 Commandments, right? Directly underneath the mercy seat is the 10 Commandments. Why did God... this is a symbol of the one that's in heaven, or the throne in heaven. So why did God choose? It wasn't Moses or Aaron. Why did God choose to put the 10 Commandments underneath the mercy seat? What is that symbolic of? They're fundamental, and His government sits on the law. It's the foundation of His government, right? It's the foundation of His government is the law of God. So God has a law. Man has a law. It's interesting to me, of course, and I'm sure you may have thought of this. So many people say that God's law was done with the 10 Commandments, done away with, nailed to the cross. And yet those same people are fighting for man's laws, right? Laws against abortion, laws against homosexual marriage, laws against this, laws against that. Really, what are they fighting for? God's law. Because God's law talks about fornication. God's law talks about murder, etc., etc. They're really fighting for God's law on earth while telling us that God's law is done away with, right? And if they hadn't ever taught that God's law was done away with, our world would be very different today, wouldn't it? If the Sabbath had never been done away with, allegedly, the world would be very different today, right? Atheism, evolution, racism, bigotry, what do they all have in common? They're all arguments against the Creator. Because if we're all God's creation, then, well, obviously that's evolution and atheism. And then if we're all God's creation, then we're all brothers and sisters. We're all equal, right? So there's no racism, there's no sexism, there's no bigotry, etc. if God's Sabbath had never been forgotten, right? So it's amazing to me. You put the law of God aside, you have all these awful consequences, and then these nations and people are fighting for these principles while denying God's law, okay? Of course, God's law is still in effect because without it, God couldn't be king, right? So authority absolutely comes with laws. That idea, authority, government, law, they're all synonyms of one another. They all go hand in hand. It's like they're a family. So, for the Antichrist to take power, for the Antichrist to have authority, he must then have what? He must have law. Because that is authority. Authority, government, law go hand in hand. So, if we read in the Bible that he takes authority from the world, then what does that really mean? He's taking law. He's in charge of law, right? Or the system is in charge of the law, right? Okay, so let's turn to Revelation 13. And there are 7 of you. Want to just go old school elementary and have everyone read a verse? Everyone want to read? Anyone not want to read? Okay, I'll read then for Chuck. So Bonnie, would you mind? Verse 1, and then verse 2, Tom, and then 3, Ann, and 4, Norma, and 5, Mary Lou, 6, Ramona, and I'll read verse 7. We'll just go through it, read it through, and then we're going to go back and discuss it in detail.
So we're at Revelation 13, correct?
Yep, Revelation 13, verse 1.
All right. And the dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. He had 10 horns and 7 heads, and 10 crowns on his horns, and on each head a blasphemous name.
Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority.
I saw that one of his heads seemed wounded beyond recovery, but the fatal wound was healed. All the world marveled at this miracle and followed the creature in awe.
And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?
And he was given a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months.
Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven.
It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. Okay, now, does it say he gets authority? Yep. In fact, as we're going to notice, it says it twice. There's 2 different periods where he's given authority, okay? So, just by random providence, I happen to choose 7 things I want us to discuss out of those 7 verses. Wasn't necessarily trying for the perfect number, but we got it. That's all right. All right, 7 things I want us to discuss. Number 1, it calls him a beast. Turn with me to Daniel chapter 7 so we can figure out what a beast is. Daniel chapter 7. We will be back in Revelation if you want to keep your finger there. But let's see Daniel chapter 7. It will tell us what a beast is. By the way, while you turn to Daniel chapter 7, when Tom read, it described the beast as being a dragon with 10 crowns It described it as being like a leopard with the feet of a bear and the face of a lion, right? Hope I got those body parts right, but I think I did. Okay, leopard, bear, lion, dragon with 10 horns. Does any of that sound familiar? That's all in Daniel chapter 7, right? Daniel sees these 4 beasts, and it's a lion with wings. It's a bear leaning to one side. It's a leopard with wings. And then he sees a dragon beast, and on its head is 10 horns, right? So we're not just randomly using a concordance and jumping around trying to find some spot where it tells us what beast can represent. We're letting the Bible define the Bible. If John is telling us that he's continuing the vision of Daniel 7, where should we turn for the context? Daniel 7, right? So Daniel 7, Revelation 13, again, like these other things, work hand in hand. Okay, Daniel 7, and anyone want to read verse 7?
Then as I watched in my dream, a fourth animal rose up out of the ocean, too dreadful to describe, and incredibly strong. It devoured some of its victims by tearing them apart with its huge iron teeth, and others it crushed beneath its feet. It was far more brutal and vicious than any of the other animals, and it had 10 horns.
Good, all right. So there's the description of a beast, right? And what does verse 23 tell us about this beast? You want to read verse 23. Here's the interpretation of verse 7.
Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth.
Okay?
Shall tread it down and break it in pieces.
Perfect. What does a beast represent then? Kingdom. Okay? Is that a government? And it's going to be given authority, which automatically means what does it have? Law. Right? It has to have law. Okay? So that has to be in our minds as we go through the context of Revelation 13. Law is the purpose. Law is the context. It's in here. Okay? All right, so the second part I want us to discuss are the 7 heads. And we have taken a look at this already in this series, so I'm going to jump through it quickly. But we have Babylon. Quiz time, what's next? Okay, next. Greece. And then Mary Lou. Yep. Oh, I almost started writing Mary Lou. I tricked my own brain. That's Romeo and Juliet for you, right? For those of you during prayer request time. Okay, Rome. Okay, so we got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. Then we have? Yep, we've got the 10 nations, right? Those 10 horns. Okay, and then we have the little horn. Well, that's papal Rome. Sure, we'll write papal Rome. We've covered this already. And then, as we're going to get back into Revelation 13, one of those heads is wounded, and that happened in 1798 when papal Rome was wounded. But the 7th head is healed of this wound. So papal Rome revived. Okay? The Bible and history works together. Yeah. I think I've shared this story before, but when I was studying history my sophomore year of college at Fresno State Secular University, I was taking West Civ 1, which is kind of a basic run-through of the world governments before the modern era. And literally in his first class of the quarter, he's kind of given us a synopsis of the whole thing. Secular university is like, well, we're going to cover certain times of our history. We're going to cover Babylon and Medo-Persia and Greece. He starts listing this very formula here, and I'm scratching my head going, where have I heard this before? where have I heard this before? I was like, oh, Mark Finley's net 97 or 98. That's right, I did hear about this. So a few years later, but it stuck with me. And it was actually that day. That's the moment I say I entered ministry, when I said, if secular universities are teaching and they don't know the truth, I want to teach the truth so that people will see how this thing all fits together. So, and I pray still to this day. I graduated 12 years ago, and I still pray to this day because several of my professors that I had got to know in the history department, when I graduated, I gave them great controversies. And I said, hey, you guys love history. You'll love this book. And I still pray to this day that if hopefully they've read it, or they didn't throw it away. I hope it's getting dust, and that they'll, all of a sudden one day it'll be a bright light. Oh, I should pick this book up and read it, right? So who knows? But anyway, they're teaching it and they don't even know it. Well, I know it and I want to teach it, right? Okay, so
Tell me the date again.
yeah, so it was 1798 when the wound was received by Papal Rome, 1798.
What does that mean?
That is when Napoleon sent General Berthier into the Sistine Chapel. He dragged the Pope out, threw him outside, and proclaimed throughout at that moment, but it was a proclamation for Europe, you will have no more power anymore. Yeah, life was over as they knew it, as popes running the governments. Yeah, and it happened to be just by providence and prophecy, of course. It's not a coincidence, but it was exactly 1,260 years after they first received power back in 538, right? So, and this we'll get back to those 42 months in a moment. So we've got the beast and we've got the 7 hens. Now, Daniel 7 deals with this one, the first one, Papal Rome. Revelation 13 deals with Papal Rome revived. Okay? In Daniel chapter 7, it talks about the timeline and how the power will be taken away from this little horn. Daniel 7 never mentions a healing. Never does. Never says it will be revived. Okay? But then you get to Revelation and they work hand in hand, and then you suddenly learn, oh, this power that had its power taken away would be healed. Okay? All right. Who remembers where this beast is coming up out of? The sea, right. Okay? Look at Revelation 17 with me. Let's find out what water represents. Why the sea? I do, by the way, believe this also is mentioning the sea in the area. Geographically, it's the Mediterranean Sea. Okay? But there's also a symbolic, prophetic meaning to this word sea also. But in case you don't know what I'm talking about by the Mediterranean Sea, here's the Mediterranean Sea, right? Okay, and all these other kingdoms are over here. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece up here. And then all of a sudden, we see a beast coming up out of the sea. Well, where's Rome? Right? You've got the famous boot kicking the ball, right? And that's Italy, right? So you've got Rome right there in the middle of the sea. Okay? That's a geographic fulfillment. Let's notice the prophetic fulfillment. Okay? Okay. Revelation 17, verse 15. Anybody want to read verse 15?
And he saith unto me, the water which thou sawest where the whore sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues.
Good. So what does the sea represent? Lots of people, because it's not a creek, it's not a river, not a pond, it's the sea. They didn't have a word for ocean at this time. Sea was the largest body of water they knew, right? They didn't know about Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean. The sea was the biggest. So whenever it's saying sea, we can understand that as ocean in terms of the size. A lot of people, okay? A lot of people, okay? So you've got Babylon, which kind of is this area, and Medo-Persia was a little bigger. Greece was a lot bigger. But then you have Rome, pagan Rome, which was really large. But then when you get to the papal Rome, it's even bigger, right? A big area, lots of people, lots of populations. Some of the most ancient, biggest cities in history were all part of this system, right? From German cities to Rome to Paris, etc. They were all part of this big, huge empire. Lots and lots of people. Okay, the fourth thing I want us to notice is the word worship. It says that they will worship the beast. Actually, to be totally correct, it says they will worship the dragon by worshiping the beast. Okay, so this really is all about the great controversy. This isn't some small... some people understand these prophecies of Daniel and Revelation to be about a small guy, Antigones Epiphanes or something, Antiochus Epiphanes, some historical figure that did some things and meet some of the criteria, but not on this global scale like this, okay? This, by worshiping, what this guy didn't cause the world to marvel after him, or didn't cause the world to marvel after Satan. Definitely, we're talking a global movement, a big movement, okay? So here is worship. Now, the whole context of Revelation 13 is all about what? Law, authority, and law. Worship. Does worship need law and order and government? Yeah. Absolutely, right? So this worship needs religious laws. And we'll read in Daniel 7 in a few minutes here. Not now, not yet, but in a few minutes we'll read how this power intends to change times and law. Okay? So it needs spiritual laws as well. Okay, now, 5 and 6 are the exact same word. Authority. Why did I write it twice?
Really, really important.
I figured someone was going to say that. It is really, really important. You're absolutely right, Chuck. You haven't been falling asleep. You've been listening. Good job. Authority is mentioned twice. I'm mentioning it twice because it's mentioned twice in this chapter. In those 7 verses we read, it's mentioned twice. There's first an authority for 42 months. Then authority again when the wound is healed. So there's 2 periods of authority. Okay? Did papal Rome have authority throughout the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages? Absolutely, right? It was the power. The kings came to it for permission to do things. Okay? All right. So, and then, well, authority will be repeated. So it's in there twice because it will happen twice. So sometimes people say, well, it's not happening now, and Rome does good things, and Mother Teresa, and John Paul II, and hey, God bless them. They did lots of good things, but we're not living in the time where they have their power. Okay, we're in the middle where the wound is healing, so we can't judge those times based on what it's doing now. Okay, we're in a different time period right now. The wound has to heal before it can have that authority again. But it says in Revelation 13, the second time, it says that it has authority over every tribe, tongue, and people. Okay, so the first time isn't as grand as the second time. The first time it doesn't say it has authority over the whole entire world. But the second time it says every tribe, tongue, nation, and people. So this first one is localized. It's localized to the known world. Did they realize at that time that there were people living in North America called, well, we call them today, Native Americans? No, so they didn't have authority over them. Did they have authority over China? No. India? No. Africa? No, right? Some parts of Africa, but not, certainly. So it was localized to its kingdom. But the second time, according to Revelation, it will be over every tribe, tongue, nation, and people. By the way, where have you heard the phrase, every tribe, tongue, nation, and people before? Does that sound familiar to you? Revelation 14, verse 6, talking about the 3 angels' messages. The everlasting gospel goes to who? Every tribe, tongue, nation, and people. Is there a movement to counter this Antichrist? Yes, and that movement is called the everlasting gospel, the good news, right? There's some good things coming, and who's going to preach that gospel? It talks about anyone, the whole world follows this except those written in the book of life, right? Because those written in the book of life have the everlasting gospel. We have a job during this time to do. Okay? Now, the last one we'll notice is it says that when it has authority, it will make war with the saints. Okay? When it has authority. Not right now, in this time where the wound is healing. There's no war with the saints. Why do you think then that the devil allowed this? Now the devil's in charge of all these world things going on, this war and this nastiness and awfulness and this changing of times and law. Why do you think the devil has this quiet time where everything's somber and no war is going on, no destruction of the saints? It's healing but yeah, you think there's any purpose in that? I think the purpose in that is because by the 1500s with the Protestant Reformation, all the reformers were saying, that guy in Rome, that's the Antichrist. And so what needed to happen? Everyone needed to put their guard down. Everyone needed to relax because everyone was pointing. Look what's happening. Look what's happening. Look, we've got to reform. We've got to protest. We've got this. We've got this. And it took some time. And then so he allows this papal authority to cease so that everyone's guard will fall. And everyone will relax. And everyone will get rich again and comfortable again and numb again, right? And that's why in Revelation 17 you see these harlot daughters back with the mother church. Because they've all let their guard down in the everlasting gospel. The real gospel is not going out to the world, right? And when he's got everyone numb, the fires of hell and persecution can raise again, right? Absolutely. Okay, so let's go back to Daniel 7:25. Just a few more things we want to notice. We're just about done. Daniel 7 again. Let's notice that something is mentioned about this war with the saints also. Daniel 7:25. So again, Daniel 7, remember, is talking about the authority for the 42 months. Okay? I'll wait till you get there. Go ahead. Daniel chapter 7. When Revelation 13 discusses the war with the saints, it's talking about this time, the seventh head. The last time, the healed wound, okay? It's discussing this one. So there's going to be a war with the saints. Daniel 7 is discussing the first time, the first reign of papal Rome, the 42 months, the 1,260 days, okay? That's what it's discussing. And notice what Daniel 7 says about this time. When it has authority, how does it use that authority? Anyone want to read verse 25? Thank you.
He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time and times and a half a time.
Okay, so there's the 1,260 days. At time, times, and half a time. All right, so what are the three things he does while he has his authority for 42 months? He blasphemes God. He, what else? Persecutes the saints of the Most High. And what's the third one? He thinks.
Change times and...
Yeah, he intends or he thinks to change times and law. Okay? So, the first time round he did those three things. Notice this. Revelation chapter 13 is discussing this seventh one, right? Okay? I'll slow down, make sure we're all getting it, because here's the big fireworks conclusion that we've got for this evening. The first time round, he did three things. Blaspheme God, persecute the saints, and change times and law. Revelation chapter 13, we just read, it says he blasphemes God, clearly said it. It says he makes war with the saints. Where's the changing of times and law? We're going to discover that's the image of the beast. Okay? And let's turn there. Some of you are staring at me like I'm crazy. You're like you're a little lost. Let's go back. So what were those three? Here, it'll help if we see it. So I'm going to erase this. These two times are different times historically. Well, one's historic, one's prophetic. One's the sixth head, one's the seventh head. But it's the same power, the same kingdom, and it's the same authority. And that authority does three things. Number one, it blasphemes God. I think it's verse 5. Are you back in Revelation 13? Or it's verse 6. Verse 6, then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against who? Against God. To blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. Okay? So that's number one. Does he do number one? In the seventh head? Yes. Number two, according to Daniel 7, is he makes war with the saints. Doesn't verse 7 say that in Revelation 13? Okay. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. Okay. What was the third part of the formula in Daniel 7? Yep. He changes times and law. Where's that at? Is that mentioned in verses 1 through 7? It's not mentioned. So what do we got to do? We've got to, if you know that something's about, yeah, you've got to keep reading. And where are we going to keep? We're going to keep reading. Is chapter 13 over? No. It's not over. When we get to, and we're going to get into this next week, so we're going to close here. When we get into this next week, this is where we're picking up. Part 1, check. Daniel 7, Revelation 13 have both mentioned that. Part 2, check. Both Daniel 7 and Revelation 13 both have that. Daniel 7 has changes times and law. Revelation 13 is now going to describe how that's going to take place. And let me ask you in closing, is there a law of God that deals with time? Yep, there's a law of God that deals with time, right? It's the Sabbath commandment, right? The fourth commandment. We're going to notice this as we get into the image of the beast. It's all about the changing of times and law. The Sabbath commandment versus the Sunday law. Okay, I've got a few more things. We'll get those on to next week. Let's go ahead and close. Father, thank you for helping us draw these parallels and these conclusions here. It's very clear from your word. Lord, we do so. We identify this power, these entities and their desires and their future plans because we want to be prepared, but also because we have a very important lesson. We have got to preach the everlasting gospel. Only the gospel, only the word can battle this power. So Lord, help us to do that. Help us, Father, to study your word more and more each day. In Jesus' name, amen.